Hello again. Hi, I'm Lizzie Paish from Change From Within, and welcome to this next episode in the series, Real Life Change From Within. And I'm really excited to welcome today Dr. Amy Johnson, who's a coach working from Michigan in the States, but working with clients all over the world. And I came across Amy because I read her book, The Little Book of Big Change, which I've got here, which is a fantastic book. I really recommend it to everybody. And I've referred it, well, I've given copies to some of my clients who, I was just telling Amy, one of my clients brought this book back in and actually kissed the book before she gave it back to me because it had meant so much to her. So that's a really great introduction to Amy Johnson. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
So in these conversations, I've just been asking people a bit about how they first came across this inside out understanding and how that then changed things in their lives. So I was hoping that maybe we could talk a little bit about that, but also I know you've worked with, a huge range of clients with all sorts of different issues and difficulties, and hope that maybe you'd be able to share some stories from your work with them as well. So how does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. So for me, kind of coming across this understanding, I had been a coach before and was having some success with people and the things I was doing. And even before that, had spent most of my childhood and life feeling like believing I was an anxious person. I had severe anxiety when I was in graduate school, barely left my apartment for 2 years, like really debilitating kind of anxiety. And I just thought that was, and I was told by innocent, well-meaning professionals, it's just kind of how you're wired, it's just kind of how you are. And I had all the evidence to prove that, because when my parents got divorced when I was little, I had these little twitches and just funny little things that I could look back with this belief I'm an anxious person. I could look back and say, yep, here I was anxious and here I was anxious and here I was anxious, and it just made sense. So I went through life believing that about myself, had lots of panic attacks for a while, lots of anxiety. And in that, in just wanting to feel better, I was seeking anything I could, as a lot of us are, to just fix myself. And did lots of therapy and tons of self-help, and really loved self-help for a while, even though it was exhausting. I got some help from it, not as much as I would have hoped, but it did help. And so I became a coach and started sharing that kind of stuff with other people, just ways of kind of trying to think differently and kind of like silver lining kind of stuff, like, well, let's look at it this way kind of thing, and that is helpful for people. If you're thinking horribly and you give somebody a better perspective, it feels a little bit better. We all know it doesn't last forever. As soon as their thinking changes, they're likely to go back, but it has some utility. So going through life, and my life had gotten better, except I picked up this binge eating habit. My anxiety had kind of died away a little bit, and that had changed. But other things were coming up and kind of taking its place. And so I was just doing the best I could. And one day came across a talk that I believe was one of the early Innate Health Conference talks. And I just listened to his talk, and all I don't remember who the speaker was or anything. I was on my couch at home just listening to it. And I remember hearing that we are healthy by nature, period. Not possible for that to change ever. And I was like, what? Like, you mean we're born healthy, right? I'm talking to myself, to this speaker. We're born healthy. Yeah, I get that. But really quickly, I got anxiety, and the more I listened, he was very clear. And he said, no, we are healthy. That never changes. And we think over it. And I just, in that moment, it's not like everything changed, my whole life changed, but it caught my attention big time, and I started to, over time from that moment on, see things a little differently. Like, what if that's what was going on? You know, what if I was healthy all of those years? I kept thinking I had anxiety, and I kept thinking I had all of these problems. And so that started to make some sense. And from that moment on, I just started listening to every free video I could online. I didn't even invest any money or do any trainings or anything, but I just took in all the free resources, which in 2012 was a lot fewer than there are now, but there's still a good number. And I saw a ton that way, you know, just by the free stuff people put out, I saw a ton, and just started to share this with my clients, and kind of snowballed from there. So yeah, that was my first kind of entry into it.
I love the way you put it. I'd not heard that before, that we're healthy and we think over it. That's a really lovely image, that, you know, it's just the thought and it's all there underneath. That's, yeah, amazing. Yeah. So when you saw that then, so you obviously had issues with eating and binge eating. So yeah. How did that then change? Did that change quite suddenly or gradually, or?
Sort of, a little bit of both. So I first saw it in terms of other things. Like, I think I was pretty thick. I was pretty thick in the middle of binge eating stuff at that point. And it didn't occur to me that it applied over here. You know, I saw it with anxiety, which I had kind of come a long way already. So I was already kind of looking at anxiety in the rearview mirror, and I could see, oh, I bet I created all that with my thinking, you know, and even just that, just a ton of freedom opened up from that. But then I had this other habit over here, and I'm like, no, that doesn't apply here. This is a real thing. So over time, though, it did start to make sense. And I came across some information about binge eating specifically that couched it in terms of, you know, your brain is doing this. It's not you. It's just the machinery. It's the machinery in your head that's kind of doing this. And that really struck me. And that was not from a 3 principles perspective. But then I was looking into the principles at the same time, and I thought, oh, that goes right together. Like, we can look at how the brain does all this stuff, but either way, we're so much bigger than our brain, you know. And now from the principles, I was getting that bigger side of the story, like before the brain, before thought. And it all just kind of came together. And at that point, when that happened, yeah, I pretty much had one of those moments where I thought, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. Yeah. And it started to a few times, but it extinguished itself pretty quickly from that point.
It's that point, isn't it, where it just doesn't make sense anymore? And that's what one of my clients who read your book said, a different one actually. I've had 2 clients who've got a lot out of your book so far. And she just said, I just thought, why am I doing this? It just didn't make sense to me anymore. And so I just stopped doing it. And that's the thing, that even though up here people can say, well, I know that doesn't make sense, at some level it does. But when that shifts and it really doesn't make sense, then it just stops, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But interesting something you said there, that you saw it first with your anxiety, and you could kind of see that you'd made that up. But with the eating, that felt more real. And there's this, you know, I've had conversations with people around that of oh yes, well, I can kind of see how that works with, you know, people who've got these kind of problems like anxiety, which we know isn't real really, or these kind of middle class problems or whatever it is. But what about people who've got real problems, you know, who are really suffering or struggling in life? You know, how can this possibly make any difference to them? So perhaps you could just say a little bit about your take on that.
Yeah. First of all, I think that's almost like part of the process. I shouldn't say, I mean, there's no process for this, and it's different for everyone. And some people see it as understanding, and it's like boom everywhere and they're changed. But for me, it wasn't that way. For a lot of people I talk with, it's not that way. It's almost like we do start to see it in areas where it's just a little easier to grasp, and it looks like there are these little exceptions all over the place. And the thing I think is really great, like I just talked with a client this morning who's in that place, and it's like, well, just sit with, like, what if it does apply? And that's what I was hearing as I was listening to all these free videos and stuff about the principles. Is it's one thing. It's simple. It's universal. It applies everywhere. And I didn't buy it, but I kept hearing it, you know, and it's, you know, and so I think there's something in that of just for people listening that maybe are thinking, yeah, but this and this, our mind will go 10 steps down the line and say, like the woman I was speaking with this morning, was like, okay, I can see if he doesn't approve of me, that's my own thinking. But then I need to do something about the relationship. Then I have to decide, like, do I end this relationship? Do I set a boundary? Do I blah, blah, blah? Like, no. That's our mind wanting to go 20 steps ahead. Just look at the simple fact that in each and every moment of our lives, we feel thought come to life, and then it goes away. And there's health underneath it. And if we can just stay, for everyone, just kind of stay at that level, I think that's a place where those exceptions just start to clear up. You just see, oh, it is here too. It is here too. Don't have to force it. You don't have to try to apply it, because then that'll just be more kind of in your head. But just, let it be simple and stick with the basics. And I think that naturally clears up the exceptions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can relate to that, because I think, I've definitely been through that stage and still find myself there sometimes, that you kind of, if this really works, then it works everywhere, then I'm going to take the most difficult, awful, traumatic situation that anybody in the world could find themselves in and try and make sure that I can understand how it works there. And actually, that's, of course, the hardest place to see it. And, we don't need to see it all at once. Even just seeing the little beginning of it can make such a difference in somebody's life, that we don't kind of need to prove the entire system in the whole world for it to be of benefit to us. And
just when you said that, it just reminded me, my 6-year-old recently learned how to ride a two-wheel bike, and she, once she got it, and she got it pretty quickly. Once she got it, she's kind of off and running, and the learning curve is very quick. But she's already like, oh, can we ride to this park, which is like 3 miles away or something, And it's kind of like that. It's like, yes, you know how to balance, sweetie, but let's stick in the neighborhood for a few months. Then we'll start going, out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is just almost the way a mind works, is our mind is kind of black and white and into extremes and dramatics. And it's like, yes, I'll prove it over here. Like, no, there's a lot of utility in just seeing it where we see it, like you said.
Yes, absolutely. So I wonder if you could share with us, Amy, some examples of clients that you've worked with that who've experienced change in different ways.
Yeah, there are definitely those stories that I think everyone really loves, which are the really kind of big, you have one conversation or someone just hears one little thing and everything falls apart. And those are fun to talk about. So, and I have seen those, and I think most people have at least seen a handful of those, and those get very, for me anyway, like, oh yeah, this is so cool. Look at that. I did a webinar once and was talking about habits and addictions and in terms of the principles. And a guy messaged on the side how they can message during a webinar that he had a gambling problem, and he was gambling, just online gambling while he was at work every day because he was bored. And so we just talked. I didn't have much time, so I just talked for a minute about that discomfort of boredom kind of leading him into this behavior that just kind of calmed his mind, and that's all it was. And if he could hang out in the boredom or let his mind calm naturally or whatever, I don't even remember what I said, but it was very brief. And he emailed me, and I remember thinking, I didn't get to say much. I really wish I had time with this person, right? Well, he emailed me like a month later and said, I haven't gambled since that webinar. And then I ran into him in the London conference, which was 6 months after the webinar. And he said, I've saved all this money and this has happened and that's it. And he still hadn't gambled. And so there are those little things where it's just something tiny, someone hears something.
Because you never know which thing it is, do you, that you say that's going to be the thing, and you thought you hadn't said hardly anything, but
right, which kind of shows it's he heard something. Yeah. It probably wasn't anything I said. It was he heard something. Yeah. And so those stories are really attractive and fun. But I think for me anyway, most of the time when I work with people, it is a little more of a gradual thing. So I had a woman just call me last week. I had coached with her for probably, maybe 8 sessions. For financial reasons, she had to stop. She was a teacher and she was off for the summer and not being paid and stuff. So take a break, and I gave her all kinds of resources and videos to we kind of set her up on like a home learning thing over the summer that she was just going to take stuff in, and, when she could. And she was really excited about that. It was like her summer school, and she had been binge eating for, I want to say, about 40 years. I mean, really long, really, really long time, and was kind of one of those people who, she was very open to a new understanding because she had tried everything and none of it had worked. So in that sense, she was open. But obviously, after 40 years and 40 years of therapy, she's pretty convinced that, no, there's a real problem here, meaning a physical brain personality thing that was not about just insight. It was much deeper than that. And she's very receptive to our talks, and we had a good kind of rapport together and just became very friendly, but we didn't like push it too much into the mental health piece of it, because she would get a little resistant to that. So she called me last week, and I was a little nervous to get her phone call, to be honest. I thought, oh gosh, what's going on? And she said, I just want to tell you, she had been in this place where early in the morning, she'd start to just feel this something arise, this tension, anxiety, discomfort, whatever we want to call it, thought, that her mind labeled as this is not good. And she'd instantly start eating. There's like no space there, So we talked a lot about that feeling's okay, and helping her see what that feeling even was, and what it's meant for, and all of that. And no, I just can't feel it. I can't feel it. I have to eat. And so when she called me, she said, I just have to tell you, I went grocery shopping yesterday morning, and I came home and I felt that feeling. And she's like, I almost felt it as if it was like over in the corner. It wasn't like 100% me, I'm in it. It was like, she's like, I felt it, and it felt a little apart from me. She said, and right away a thought came in that said, why don't you just sit down and have a glass of water? So she sat down and had a glass of water, and she's like, you're never going to believe this. The craziest thing happened. The feeling changed. I'm like, what do you know? Matter of fact, I do believe you. Like for her, it was so simple. And it doesn't matter what we believe about mental health, about anything. That wasn't even part of the conversation. It was like a woman in one moment felt something and said, I'm okay. I'm going to drink some water right now. That's it. And that's all she needed to see. You know what I mean? Just in that moment of seeing that gave her the insight. Wow, that's possible. And then we never, the conversation never had to be about convincing her of anything or seeing, it's like she felt it. Yeah. So those are the kind of things I think that happen frequently, where maybe as a practitioner, we kind of go in thinking, we're going to talk about this, and I'll teach them how this works and all of that. And then it's just always amazing how the insights for people are just so personal and not what we might expect, but those are the ones that just show them the truth for them.
Yes. Yeah, because it's about a sort of waking something in them, isn't it? It's never about us, really. It's just about resonating with something. And that really reminds me of something a client said to me actually only this morning, where she'd read something in a newspaper, a headline that kind of upset her, and she noticed that her immediate thought was, I want to eat something. And she just saw that almost as if she was like somewhere else, observing herself, just like you described this person saying, it's not me anymore. So in the past, she would just have eaten something, but she saw that the upsetting headline and the I want to eat were connected, and that they shouldn't be. And so that was a real insight for her. So it's so simple, isn't it? I think that's, it's hard. And that sometimes I find that can make it hard to explain to potential clients, who sort of say, well, what exactly are you going to do? And how are you going to coach me? And what are you going to say? And what techniques are you going to use? And actually, well, it's not really about any of that. And that can be, hard for people to understand what you're getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes, I think, I know that I just think about myself years ago when I was caught up in something very painful. I don't know that I would have had the patience for that, or you know what I mean? I think I know for me, especially in anxiety, like, no, you're going to show me something that's proven, that has some techniques behind it. Like, so I never ever, question or get disappointed or anything when clients I guess I probably get disappointed, but I understand when people do that. But I think, I also think it's just something really wonderful about having those conversations and just telling people, this is about seeing something bigger underneath all the behavior and underneath all the thought and emotion too, like what's behind it. And most people do kind of come around to that and see that, because we've all tried a million behaviors. And they might change, they might fix things for like a week, but they don't lead to deep fundamental change as a human being, like a change in how you see the world. And that's what this does. So in that sense, as much as people are very used to wanting something and what can I expect to see after a week and after 2 weeks and that kind of thing, I don't know, it does seem like a very, very often when you talk about what this really is, oh, okay, I can see that. And that's what I really want, is a foundation change.
Yeah, something sort of, they hear something, because I think most people are aware, if they've got to this point, are aware that there's something else to their experience apart from their behaviour, aren't they? And yes, and I think sometimes just hearing that somebody else is coming from that place, if I'm speaking from that place of seeing something bigger, people just love to hear that, really, to feel that that's, it's not just, they're not just the only one that's kind of felt that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really wonderful stuff we get to do. To share this, to share it and to let people, like in the stories I told and stories you told, the common theme in all of that is people's insights are personal, and they do see all we ever have to do is just kind of look in a direction of what's the simple truth behind things. And then it kind of pops up for people in all kinds of different ways and in their own timing and all of that. I think that's a nice thing to know.
Yeah. And also I always feel very reassured by the fact that whatever, because people, I'm sure, come to you as they do to me with a whole range of different issues. It can be, really dramatically different things that are manifesting in their lives. But I know that it all only ever comes back to this misunderstanding of where their feelings are coming from, and that however much it looks like something else, that's what it is. And so there's just this sort of one, it's not when you think life works from the outside in, you've got a million things you've got to change and control. But when it's from the inside out, there's only one place to look, isn't there? And the more time you spend looking there, the more likely you are to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just that human tendency, especially in our misunderstanding, to want to look at the form of everything and sift through that, and sometimes in some ways innocently cling to our problem, like we were talking about, like, no, but you don't understand my problem. and for us to just be able to know that's just human too, it's just another example of us caught up in thinking that looks really real. And yeah, like you said, to know that it doesn't matter what the problem is, what the habit is, what the situation is, the answer is always the same. It makes things so simple.
And yet we've spent our whole lives being directed to look at the form, and that's why we sort of err in that direction, because it's so familiar, isn't it? It's we're not looking for beyond that.
Right.
Well, Amy, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about some of the work that you do and the programs that you run that people might be interested in.
Sure. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with people all over the world. So that's great. I have around the book, the Little Book of Big Change. I have all kinds of courses I've taught and things that are available for like extra support on this, especially around the book. I have a course that's kind of the companion course for the book that has a video that goes into depth on each chapter, each of the 20 chapters in the book. So if anyone's read the book and wants more that way, that's available. And I do live events every once in a while. If you happen to be in the States or want to travel to the States, I have one coming up in October in Michigan. Yeah, lots of good stuff. And I have a lot of free stuff as well. Every week I write a new article that's free that I give out in my newsletter, and do lots of videos and things like that to help people see this.
Yeah. Great, yes, and I love your website, and there's so much stuff on there. So I'm sure some of our watchers would love to visit that. So, and that's just Amy Johnson. No, you say the web address.
Yeah, it's dramyjohnson.com. So it's just dramyjohnson.com.
Right. Okay, that's great. Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this afternoon. It's been really great to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie. It's been good.